So welcome to the very first episode of the Fight Night Quickie with myself, Newsome. Now, the purpose of these podcasts, just a really quick overview, is, with everything that I do in the sport of MMA, I am quite a busy person, and that's why the original Fight Night podcast stopped. It was just really time consuming week after week after week. So I came up with this idea to provide, video content for the first time. I posted just audio, and just to be able to quick fire off, a card running through each fight, giving a brief breakdown of who I think is going to win and why, really. So I hope you all enjoy it, and we'll get started because we've got a great card this weekend at UFC Rio Rancho. We've got Corey Anderson versus Jan Blachowicz 2, which obviously a rematch from 2015, so I'm really excited to see how that plays out. But we're just going to go from bottom to top, like I say, quick fire through as quick as I can, but I'll try and provide as much information on each fight as I can for you as well. So I'm not really sure on where this fight is going to be placed because there was a fight cancellation, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, with Nico Montano pulling out against Macy Chiasson. We've got Shanna Young coming in, which is a fighter that, she's been around on the Invicta scene. So, I always quite like fighters coming from Invicta with women's MMA because I think it's sort of a proven testing ground for them. It's where the majority of the best female fighters in the world are fighting. So I quite like that she's coming in with that experience. But I can't look past Macy Chiasson in this fight. She's tall, she's long, she's aggressive, she'll come forward and strike. But the biggest part of Chiasson's game for me is her strength in the clinch. So she will push her opponents up against the cage, she will engage in the clinch, she'll just use a power and a strength against the cage to just really dominate women. And it's not always the most exciting fights to watch, but the one thing it does do from Chiasson's point of view is it wastes minutes on the clock, the round winning minutes as well. So like I say, it's not the most exciting type of fight, but it's definitely a massive strength of hers, and it gets her the wins, which to these fighters is the most important thing. Now, I actually think that Chiasson can get a finish in this fight as well. From what I've seen of Shanna Young, her striking still has room for development, and so is Chiasson's. But I just think that when Shanna Young's coming forward, she does tend to be a little sloppy in the brawls, and she, when I'm talking about the coming forward side, she is better coming forward. I'm not sure how much of that she's going to have against Macy Chiasson, just because of Chiasson's size and aggressiveness. So I think she'll be on the back foot predominantly. I think when it's against the cage, she'll be getting clinched up. I think she'll be eating knees, she'll be eating elbows, and I actually think Chiasson finds a finish in this fight. So I'm going to take Macy Chiasson to win. I'm going to take her to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Mark De La Rosa versus Raulian Paiva. Again, a really good fight. I've been really high on Paiva, he's got a good record. He is 0-2 in the UFC, which is a concern, but, when you look at that, you can dig a little deeper and say, well, the first fight was a very close split decision to Kai Kara-France, who at that point had experience in the UFC, had been in the Ultimate Fighter. Kai Kara-France was at home in that fight as well. And then in his second fight, he got stopped by a cut. I actually bet Paiva in that second fight as well. I'm really disappointed to, not just from a bet perspective, not to see that fight progress, but I really, really wanted to see how those two guys matched up because I thought it was an excellent fight. I took Paiva at a plus money underdog. Obviously, it didn't pan out on the night. He got stopped by a nasty cut. One that you can't complain about. It was about as deep as it gets. And then on the other side, you've got Mark De La Rosa, also had moments against Kai Kara-France. I think Paiva did much better in that fight than against Kai Kara-France than what Mark De La Rosa did. But that we're getting into MMA math at that point. I think this is an interesting fight. I think De La Rosa can be overlooked at times. I think his striking isn't exceptional, but it can be effective in short bursts, so he will come forward, he'll throw plenty of strikes, but it's his ground game where he's really prolific. He's a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter, plenty of submissions on his record, good in the transitions. Off his back, he's not. It's a little bit like how I spoke about Dan Ige last week. Dan Ige was a fantastic top player, but when he's on the bottom, when he's flat on his back, he can be a little bit ineffective at times. I think that Paiva isn't going to be shooting for many takedowns in this fight. He's tall, he's long, he's got decent reach. I think he'll try and play to his advantages in this fight. You know, the gap in striking in this fight for me is the biggest gap in the entire fight, because Paiva can grapple, he can wrestle as well. I do think De La Rosa might have the edge in that area, but if he tries taking Paiva down, I think Paiva can scramble and get back up to his feet. But the striking is where this fight, you know, has a big difference in skill gap. And for that reason, I just think Paiva is gonna beat Mark De La Rosa to the punch. He is going to be landing his jabs, he is going to be landing kicks, and I actually don't see a finish in this fight unless Paiva does really accumulate a lot of volume in this fight to the point of, you know, it's just a case of he's hit De La Rosa that many times and he ends up falling. But I am going to edge with the side of the scorecards, and I think when it hits the scorecards, I think what the judges are going to see is volume, not just from the hands but from the legs as well. I think they're going to see get-ups from Paiva if Mark De La Rosa has got some takedowns, and I just think all these little things are just going to be in, you know, going to be in favour of Paiva when it comes to that 3-round decision. So I'm going to take Raulian Paiva to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got another phenomenal fight, and I've seen a lot of people on either side of this fight, so I was really interested to go in there, watch tape and break it down. We've got Kenney versus Merab Dvalishvili. Now, Merab Dvalishvili is a fighter that, you know, I've liked for a while now, and there's so many reasons to like this guy. He's a ball of energy, he's a ton of fun to watch. He's quite reckless in his striking, but he's got a good chin, so he can be. His takedowns are explosive, he will lift his opponents, he will throw them about, and pretty much every Merab Dvalishvili fight, bar the maybe a Terrian Ware fight that we've seen, has just been a ton of fun to watch, so it's really difficult not to like this guy. But on the other side of the coin, we've got Kenney. Kenney is a guy that, again, I didn't bet against him twice. I've picked against him twice in his last 2 fights. And I think I really you know, underrated him a little bit, because he's proved to be much better than I originally thought. And what I like about Kenney is he's a winner. Like, if he's in a bad spot, he'll just find a way. It's almost like he's got a ton of UFC experience, even though he's only fought twice inside the octagon. So it's really refreshing to see a young fighter come up with these sort of traits and attributes, and I think he's got a really good future ahead of him. Now, for me, this fight, you know, there's going to be exchanges on the feet. All fights start standing. Merab is quite, like I've said, a little bit reckless, but his striking is getting better. Like, I watched a clip on Instagram from a fight in 2011 that he had in Georgia, and he was going absolutely nuts. You know, his striking, it was all over the place. But then, you know, fast forward all these years to 2020, and the difference is mind-blowing between what I saw then and what I'm seeing now. He's a lot more technical, and it's not a surprise that he's making these developments, because he's with a great camp over with Serra Longo, training with guys like Ali Quinta, Aljamain Sterling, and obviously, like I've just said, he's got the tutorage of Ray Longo and Matt Serra. So it's not surprised that these developments are being made. Kenney in the striking, on the other hand, again, is a decent kickboxer, but also, again, nothing to really shout home about. You know, Manny Bermudez was tagging him up in that 3rd round. He was landing shots on him. So I do think that both guys are okay striking, I don't think any of them have got a true advantage in the striking. But I don't think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the mat. It's going to be a wrestling battle between them both. Who can get top time? Who can get the most takedowns? And I actually favour Merab Dvalishvili in this fight, and there's a couple of reasons why. So first and foremost, Kenney's defensive wrestling is absolutely on point. It is really, really good. But these tend to come from more traditional takedown attempts. So take the Ray Borg fight, for example. You know, he was shooting single legs, he was shooting double legs, and Kenney was getting the crotch lock, he was getting his arms around the body in the middle of the takedown. Also, when he's on the mat, he can be put in a better position, he can get himself in a better position. But Dvalishvili doesn't always shoot these traditional style takedowns. In fact, one takedown that he likes quite a lot from the tape that I've seen is he goes for the single leg, he'll lift the single leg, and then he'll trip the standing leg. It's all real unorthodox, you know, takedown attempts, and then, you know, when you get him back up from that, he'll get you back, he'll try and pick you up and throw you. And I just, where I think that Kenney's wrestling defense is really good, I just feel that Merab's going to have a little bit something different for him in this fight. And like I said, the one thing about Merab, and this is the main thing in this fight, is his speed, his pace, his pressure, and how how long he can hold on for. Like, he goes out in the first round and you think this dude is going to be gassed by round 3, but then it gets to round 3 and he's still going as hard as what he was in round 1. It's an unbelievable trait to have, and for his size, you know, being short and that stocky and muscular, it's really, really crazy to see, and it's something that we don't see very often for these types of guys with that physique. So in the Casey Kenney and Manny Bermudez fight, I know Manny Bermudez did come in heavier, and he was heavier on the night, but I think Dvalishvili is going to be heavier than Casey on the night as well. And Casey Kenney did slow down sort of halfway through that second round coming into the third, and I think that's where Merab can definitely win rounds. So I think Merab Dvalishvili can win 2 rounds, and for that reason I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight we've got Devin Clark versus Dequan Townsend. Now, it's mad that Townsend's back in the cage. You know, we only just saw him a few weeks ago against Bevon Lewis. He didn't really take too much damage though, so I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's coming in. And fair play to the guy, you know, getting his checks cashed before. Well, I'm not going to say before he gets cut, but you know, I do think if he loses this fight, which I do, spoiler alert, I do think unfortunately he's going to get his walking papers. But all credit to the guy coming back so soon, just after a fight a few weeks ago. Ton of respect for guys that are doing that. So in this fight, I just think I do think Townsend is actually liver than some people give him credit for, because the dude has got some pop on his strikes, and Devin Clark I don't believe has the best chin. So I do think that there's definitely a path to victory there for Townsend, and also Townsend is going to be much taller, much longer. So this is definitely, like, Townsend, I don't think can be written off totally in this fight at all. I definitely think that he could crack Clark and put him out, but I just think Devin Clark's going to play this fight safe, you know. And the one thing that Townsend does allow, and his biggest problem in this fight, is he does allow himself to be grinded on by these wrestlers, and that's exactly what Devin Clark specialises in. You know, he's going to come forward, he's going to push against the cage, and ultimately he's just going to wear Townsend out, score takedowns, have some top time. Townsend will probably get back up, and then Clark will be on him again, takedown, rinse and repeat. So I don't think, unless Townsend does knock him out, I don't think it's going to be a spectacular fight, but I think it's going to be a clinical fight from Devin Clark, and he'll just be doing whatever he can to secure himself that win. So I am going to take Devin Clark to win this fight. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Jim Miller versus Scott Holtzman. So again, this is a fight that, you know, I went in leaning Scott Holtzman, I've come out picking Jim Miller, and the reasons why is, for a start, I keep thinking Holtzman's much bigger than what he is. You know, I think he's 5'9", I think Miller's 5'8", so there's not much difference in height, and obviously they're going to weigh in the same as well, but I don't know, it's just really deceiving because Holtzman is just absolutely stacked. He's a dude in shape, but when you come down to breaking this fight, you know, breaking this fight down, I don't think it's a case of we've got one young guy making his way up against, you know, the aging veteran, because they're both a similar age as well, which is also crazy to think of at this point. But for me, Holtzman, I do like his game. He's a very pressure forward fighter. He'll come forward, he'll wing bombs, he wants to finish the fight at every stage of the fight. But he's got a few holes in his game that I think will play directly into Jim Miller. And the first one is, I've seen him time and time again in tape when he gets clinched against the cage. When he gets clinched against the cage, he'll show his back to his opponent to try and get out of these clinch positions. He did it against Nick Lentz. He did it against Dong Hyun Ma as well. When they clinched up, he shows his back to his opponent. Now with Jim Miller, this is a huge risk, because look at the Jason Gonzalez fight. He showed his back to Miller, and look what happened then. It was over very shortly afterwards. And, you know, when Gonzalez showed his back, Miller sunk them hooks in, got the back against the cage, and like I say, he choked him out pretty much within sort of about 60 seconds after that back take. So Holtzman can't do this. He cannot give his back in this fight. The worry that I've got for Miller, and I don't know why I've got this worry, and I'll explain why in a second, but the worry I've got is Holtzman hits hard. And I just feel that Miller can still be hurt. I know he's overcoming or learning to deal with this Lyme disease that he has in regards to being a professional mixed martial artist and training, but I still feel that Miller could be knocked out in this fight if Holtzman lands a good straight right. And this is going to be an orthodox versus southpaw type of fight as well, so these straight hands from either opponent are going to be very dangerous. And actually it's both fighters' best weapons as well, because Miller has got a really solid straight left. it's a really good weapon of his. So both fighters are going to have to watch these straight punches, because someone's going to, I think someone's going to get dropped and rocked in this fight. But when it comes to the brawls, when it comes to the combinations, I just feel that Holtzman's a little bit more robotic, and I actually think he's a little bit slower than Miller as well. I think Miller's hand speed's a little bit better. I think it's technically better. I think he hits from more angles. I don't think Miller's going to be able to get like a flush double leg takedown. I mean, it's not out the realms of possibility, but I think it's more going to be Miller being first to the punch, quicker in the combinations. If it backs Holtzman up, he can clinch up. Holtzman might show his back, Miller might take his back. That might be the way he gets him down. But I actually think that unless Miller gets caught with one of them straight rights, he's going to win this fight. I do think somehow, some way he gets the fight to the mat, and I just think we're going to see levels of this sport at that point, and I think Jim Miller's going to submit him. So I've got Jim Miller to win this fight. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And next up, we've got a good fight here between John Dodson and Nathaniel Wood. Now, this is, like I say, a really good fight, and it's going to be a really interesting one, because it's almost like we've got prospect versus aging veteran here, and like I say, it's going to be a really good fight. Nathaniel Wood is the young prospect from the UK, making his way up into the UFC, winning fights, hopefully, and he'll be ranked at some point in the top 15, and I genuinely do think he will be as well, because I think this guy's got a really, really high ceiling. So well-rounded, good striker, utilises low kicks, he's aggressive, he can fight moving backwards, he can fight going forwards, he doesn't mind getting into a firefight and throwing hands. He's got good wrestling, he's got with his takedowns, he's got a good top control, he's got a good submission game. I just think that Nathaniel Wood right now has got everything that you need to see from a prospect moving his way up into the UFC. So I'm really excited to see how he's developed for this fight, because that's another thing with him being a young fighter. He is developing from fight to fight, which, like I said last week in the Dan Ige fight, that sort of stuff just can't be ignored. Now you've got Dodson on the other side, and he's going the opposite way. You know, he's been around for years, he's a veteran, he's got a lot of wins, a lot of good wins, known for his volume, his speed, his darting in and out of range, lateral movement, coming forward, finding angles. Like, he's made a career out of that, and he's been such a difficult fighter to beat over the years in multiple weight divisions as well. But I do think with Dodson he is declining. Now, I don't think it's a drastic decline, but it is something that, again, you notice from fight to fight, and he isn't as fast as what he used to be. His movement isn't as great as what it used to be. The darting in and out of range, which I spoke about, isn't as fast and accurate as it used to be. So these are all signs to me, and also the moving backwards side of stuff as well. He moves backwards way more than what he used to. We've only seen in the Mighty Mouse fight where he really did start to move backwards in that fight, but these to me are all signs of an obvious decline, and it's going to be a really interesting fight, and it almost comes down to the styles and what Nathaniel Wood can do to neutralise John Dodson, because John Dodson's going to be in his hometown. He's going to be fired up. Like I say, he's not washed in my opinion, but he is a fighter that's, I think, is getting slightly worse each time we see him, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. But it's almost what Nathaniel Wood can do to shut down Dodson, and I think this fight could almost play out similar to the Jimmy Rivera fight, because what Rivera did in that fight is he chopped John Dodson's legs down really early on and started landing 3 or 4 shots to the legs, and that really slowed Dodson down and really got him off his game as well. And that's actually, like I've already mentioned, a weapon that Nathaniel Wood does utilise, these low kicks. So I do think that those are going to help him for sure. Something else I've noticed about John Dodson as well is when he gets hit hard for the first time from his opponents, he does start backing up a little bit more. It's almost like he respects his opponent and the power too much. But it really throws him off his game. Again, that's something Rivera did. Petr Yan did that as well. So it is a little trend that I'm noticing with John Dodson at this point. And then if Nathaniel Wood does crack him and starts pushing Dodson back, he can then start mixing his game up. He can then start trying to score takedowns. And these UK wrestlers, man, are so underrated by a lot of people in regards to the wrestling. Guys like Leon Edwards and Nathaniel Wood, Mike Grundy, Jack Shaw, these guys have got really good takedowns, and they're much better wrestlers than some people give them credit for. Nathaniel Wood, like I said, is another one, and I do think he can score takedowns in this fight. Is it going to be a BJJ clinic? I don't think so. I do think Dodson can pop back up, unless Wood can sneak the back, he's got a good back take, but I just feel that mixing this game up, low kicks, pushing Dodson back, hitting him hard, takedowns, all this sort of stuff, I think they're all round winning things, and they're all things that throw Dodson off his game. So I do think it's going to hit the scorecards, and for that reason I'm going to take Nathaniel Wood to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got a short notice fight. We've got Tim Means, who was supposed to fight Amiv, I believe. Now fighting Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez coming in from the Contender Series. He actually looks a pretty solid fighter, to be honest, but the issue that I've got with Rodriguez in this fight is he's coming from the Contender Series. He could potentially be a little green, with some UFC jitters in there as well. But he's a decent technical fighter, and he does mix it up with kicks and his hands as well. But I just think the veteran experience of Tim Means is going to show in this fight. Now, the one concern I've got with Tim Means is the dude can be knocked out at this point. We've seen it a few times now. And Daniel Rodriguez hits hard. When he catches his opponents, they go down hard. So I do think that Tim Means has just got to be careful of the power, but if he just plays a safe fight here, you know, staying at range, popping his jab out, moving around, just using that vet experience, you know, he's been around for so many years. Unless Rodriguez does catch him and knock him out, I do find it hard at this point to see Daniel Rodriguez getting the win. So I do think he's tough as well. I don't think Means is going to knock him out. I'm going to trust that Means is going to play a smart technical fight, and for that reason I'm going to take Tim Means to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight we've got Lando Vannata versus Yancy Medeiros. Now I'm really intrigued of where Yancy Medeiros has been for the last couple of years, you know, what he's been up to. There's not really too many giveaways, so it's hard to really get a read on that. Lando Vannata, he's a fighter, you know, he's had 8 fights in the UFC and he's only won 2, so that might shock a few people with that fact. Obviously he's had a couple of draws in there, he's been in a lot of wars as well, but he's a fighter that is exciting to watch. He has got technical ability. He's an NCAA Division 1 wrestler. He's got crazy attacks, flashy kicks, power in his hands as well. It's really hard to understand why he hasn't got more wins in the UFC. I don't really know. I mean, you've got to take out the Mark Diakiese fight, you know, his last fight out, because that was just, you know, Mark Diakiese was just levels above him. He had the better game plan. It was a good stylistic fight for him as well, and the execution of the game plan and crossed with the styles, it was just a perfect fight for Mark come the victory. So I don't put too much stock into that when we're coming into this fight, because Yancy Medeiros isn't a fighter like Mark Diakiese. So I do think he's going to have moments, Yancy Medeiros, in this fight. He is tough, he's got that Hawaiian toughness. I do think he's going to be able to push forward at times. For me, this fight is going to tell us a lot in round 1 where Lando Vannata and Yancy Medeiros both are, because, you know, coming off a few losses now in Lando, and like I say, he's only got 2 wins in the UFC, and Yancy Medeiros coming off that loss against Cowboy and having the layoff, it's going to be a really interesting fight. Now, I think if Yancy Medeiros' toughness is still there, I think if he's still got that durability, I think he's going to win this fight, because I think Lando's going to come forward hard early on, and I do think he's going to drop Yancy as well. I think he's going to really put it on him in round 1. But I just think if Yancy survives that onslaught, and if he does get back up, if he is dropped, I do think Lando Vannata is going to tire. We've seen it in fights, in pretty much all of his fights. You know, the longer the fight goes on, the more it does wear a lot on Lando's cardio. So it's all about, for me, I think Lando's going to come out stronger. Medeiros is going to have to weather a storm, but then I do see him coming back in this fight, and I am going to edge on the side of Yancy Medeiros being able to survive the storm. I do think that, like I said, he does get hurt, but I do think he's going to come back to his feet. And I think if this fight gets into round 2, the late, you know, sort of the halfway point of round 2, moving to the end of round 2 and into round 3, I think we're going to see Yancy's volume pick up a little bit. I think we're going to see the straight shots, jabs, straight right. I think he's going to switch stances, and I just think the volume is going to be there. He's going to finish the fight stronger, and I don't think he's going to put Lando out, because Yancy, again, his cardio's not bad, but I do think the longer the fight goes on, the less chance he has of knocking him out. And for that reason, I'm going to side with Yancy Medeiros, and I'm going to side with him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Rogerio Bontorin versus Ray Borg, and this is going to be another really good fight. Low key, this is a really good fight card. You know, Bontorin, experienced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player, really solid on the mat. He's big for a flyweight as well. And talking of flyweight, we've got Ray Borg dropping down back to flyweight for the first time in a while as well. So it's going to be, the Waynes are going to be interested in that fight because he has missed weight a couple of times. And I thought the move up to 135 was a permanent move for him, but you know, clearly not. But Ray Borg's back. He's going to be fighting at home in New Mexico, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. Ultimately, I'm on the side of Borg in this fight. You know, I respect Bontorin's ground game, but I've got a couple of issues here with Bontorin against Ray Borg's style. So the first one is the takedowns. You know, Ray Borg is a relentless wrestler inside the cage. He'll shoot double legs in the middle of the octagon. If he can't get the double legs, he'll push them up against the cage, and then he'll start to chain wrestle. This is where I think he's really going to get Bontorin, because it looks to me like Bontorin can stop first attempts quite well, but I have not seen him against this type of wrestler before. This type of wrestler that will chain against the cage, that will be relentless, that won't stop, that won't tire, that will really put it on him. And I do think that Borg will have, I do think that Bontorin will have a lot of moments in that first round. And it wouldn't surprise me if he actually won that first round with some sweeps and reverses as well. But I think what's going to hurt Bontorin more in this fight is him actually trying to stand up after each takedown opposed to grapple. So I think if he decides to stay on the mat, you know, be fine with being put on his back and then start to work sweeps and reversals, I think that'll serve him better. And there's a reason for this. I think if he keeps standing back up and getting taken down, standing back up and get taken down, not only will that morally deflate him, but I think it will also hurt his cardio. I don't think his cardio is the best. It's not the worst either, but I do think he slows down. And with this in Rio Rancho, I know it's not the altitude of Albuquerque, but it's still pretty high. I do feel that we could see Bontorin tire if Borg is really on his game and comes out fast and starts wrestling and scrambling and all that good stuff. So I don't see Borg getting caught in a submission. I think he's too savvy for that. I think he recognises submission attempts really early, works his way out of them and finds better positions. He's just got to really be careful of this fight on the feet, because Bontorin is, for me, is the better striker, and he also hits like a truck as well. So that could again play into Borg's game plan, because if Borg is aware of that, he might be even more interested in wrestling than what he would be in other fights. So I've got Ray Borg winning this fight. I just see him, you know, if you said to me now, do you think Ray Borg can win 2 rounds in this fight? I'd tell you absolutely. So I think Ray Borg's going to win the fight. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Brok Weaver versus Kazula Vargas. Now, it's a really interesting fight, this, because obviously we're seeing Brok Weaver in the UFC for the first time. He was supposed to have been on a card a couple of months ago, I believe, but something happened. I can't remember what. I think it might have been undisclosed anyway. But he's back. He's in the UFC and he's fighting this Saturday night. And I actually really like Brok Weaver. You know, he comes from more of a boxing background. He's very aggressive, pressure heavy, comes forward, doesn't mind taking a shot to give one. You know, he's that type of fighter. And you know, in his previous fights, you could say that, you know, he was a little reckless, or he was a little green, a little bit inexperienced. He wasn't to the, you know, he wasn't at that UFC level then. But I genuinely believe this guy's developing really, really quickly. And one thing that sort of tells me that as well is, you know, when you go, like I've said, he's got a boxing background, but when you go and really research into the dude, he's got a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, which we've seen in his last few fights as well. Not the Contender Series fight, a couple of Island fights before that, scoring takedowns, working top control quite nicely. And for somebody to have that boxing background, but to constantly put the gi on and be progressing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, moving up the, you know, the belts, I just feel that that's a guy that's committed to the sport, that is improving, that is developing, that wants to be better. And yeah, I really like Brok Weaver. He's a fighter that I think can take a fight anywhere. Like I say, he's aggressive on the feet, but he's also got a good ground game as well. And on the other side of the coin, we've got Kazula Vargas. Now, Vargas is someone that hasn't impressed me at all. You know, he was taken down constantly by Alex De Silva. you know, he had no way to get back up to his feet. He did reverse a position a couple of times, but they tended to be at the end of the rounds when he'd already lost the round. The damage had already been done on the score, from a scorecard's perspective. So he's a fighter that I think can get taken down quite a lot. And yeah, like these guys that get taken down and can't get back up, they've got real problems in the UFC, and genuinely good fighters have been cut for that reason. Like, look at Curtis Melender, for example. The guy is a good fighter, but when he gets taken down, he gets taken down relatively easily, and he just can't get back up to his feet. And, you know, it just does not cut it in this level in the UFC. And I found it funny, actually, because on one of Brok Weaver's Instagram posts, he actually posted something to his jiu-jitsu coach and said, "You better have my black belt ready for my victory next weekend." So to me, that tells me that Brok Weaver's going to come in there with some takedowns and try and get a submission. And I think it's very possible against someone like Vargas. Like I say, he doesn't defend takedowns very well, and you know, I've seen him getting taken down by guys on the regional scene that just aren't wrestlers, and getting held down as well. So I think Brok Weaver's got this fight sort of covered everywhere, but I think he's actually going to go into this fight, score some takedowns and win via submission. So I've got Brok Weaver to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And in the next fight, we've got a good fight here from my perspective anyway, because I love to see these types of fights. We've got Montana De La Rosa versus Romero Borella. And the reason why I like this fight is because I do think it's going to be a predominant grappling war. You know, both fighters aren't too prolific on the feet, and where all fights start standing, obviously, I don't think that this fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. I think it would be a crazy stalemate if this fight went 3 rounds onto the judges' scorecards with no takedowns and no grappling. And I think it'd be one of them types of fights where you're looking at your buddy next to you thinking who's won the fight, you know. But I do think that this fight is going to come down to who is the better wrestler. And for me, I think Montana De La Rosa is the better wrestler. I think a takedowns, entries, a timing and a completion rate is just against better opposition as well. I just think is going to be the difference in this fight. Now, Borella on bottom, again, I think she can defend submissions quite well. If she does end up on top for whatever reason, I think De La Rosa is better off her back than what Borella is on her back. So I just feel that on the floor, De La Rosa's the slightly better grappler. I think she's the better wrestler. On the feet, it's going to be really close. But like I say, I think when we get to the scorecards, I don't think the judges are going to be looking at, well, who landed more volume on the feet and who was the better mover, because I just think the fight isn't going to, you know, the major talking points of this fight aren't going to be on the feet. They're going to be on the mat. And for all those reasons, I'm going to take Montana De La Rosa to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Diego Sanchez versus Michel Pereira. Now, obviously, everyone's going to be looking forward to this fight. We've got Diego Sanchez, who is an absolute psycho inside the cage. On the opposite side, we've got Pereira, who'll come out doing backflips, trying to take your chin off with some crazy stuff. Huge welterweight, absolutely massive for 170. I don't know how he makes weight, but the one thing that concerns me from Diego Sanchez's point of view is he has been knocked out quite a lot of times. He is a fighter that's definitely declined, and you know, you do worry every time a punch is aimed towards his chin as if he's going to be able to take it or not. But actually the biggest thing that worries me is that he's come off a 3-month retrospective ban from USADA, so I'm not exactly sure what he was popped for, but 90% of the time juice is juice. So it does worry me that he had something in his system that is now not in his system, and he's now coming against a beast like Pereira in regards to the striking anyway. Now, for me, what Diego Sanchez needs to do is come out of into this fight and just shoot takedowns, because the one thing that Pereira does struggle with, he does struggle with guys that can surpass his power, that at least take his shots or tire him out, so the power's not there anymore. And I almost think that if Pereira's not careful, this fight could end up looking very much like Diego Sanchez and Mickey Gall, in regards to Sanchez just catching the takedowns and tiring Pereira out until he's got nothing left. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Diego Sanchez handles this big crazy monster that's inside the cage. But ultimately, I'm going to side with Michel Pereira in this fight. I do think, if you said to me right now, do you think he catches Sanchez with at least one hard punch on the chin in 15 minutes? I think he does. And do I think that he is able to take those strikes? No, I don't. You know, look what he did to Danny Roberts. Danny Roberts isn't a bad fighter by any stretch of the imagination. And Michel Pereira went out there. He absolutely, you know, he was so elusive. I think Roberts was a little bit like, well, what the hell do I do here? And then suddenly he's laid unconscious. So Pereira has that type of game. He has that type of style. He has that type of power. I think he touches Sanchez on the chin sometime in the first round. For that reason, I think Michel Pereira is going to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the main event of the evening, we've got the rematch. We've got Corey Anderson versus Jan Blachowicz. Now, what you can take from that first fight, you know, is still up for debate, because it was 5 years ago. They were both different fighters back then. Both have improved so much since that fight. But I think they've both improved at similar levels. So I actually think this fight is going to play out quite similar. I don't think it's going to be as dominant for Corey Anderson, because Corey Anderson was very dominant in this fight, in that first fight back in 2015. Jan tired after sort of like a round, which we don't really see anymore, although I don't think his cardio and his movement is exceptional. He's just better than what it was back in 2015. So the other thing to consider is we've got an extra 2 rounds here opposed to that 3 rounds back there as well. Like I've mentioned earlier, I know it's not Albuquerque, but you know, Rio Rancho is still at some sort of elevation, so maybe that might play a part over 5 rounds, who knows. But like I say, both guys have progressed at very similar rates, so I do think the fight's going to be similar, just not as dominant, and you know, that spoiled it right there, because I am going to take Corey Anderson to win this fight. I just think that Corey Anderson's wrestling, his MMA wrestling is just exceptional, and I do think that where Jan Blachowicz's takedown defense has massively improved over the years, it was someone like Jacare in his last fight. I do think that Jacare didn't really know how to chain the takedowns together against the cage in those positions, and for that reason he didn't get him down. But Corey Anderson does know how to chain takedowns. He does, you know, he's like I've said, his MMA wrestling is exceptional. And I think if he gets Blachowicz in the positions that Jacare had him in, I've got absolutely no doubts that Corey Anderson takes him down. And does Jan stand back up quite quickly? I'm not too sure. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Again, he was a brown belt last time they fought, so again, progress, developments. So Jan's not bad on his back, but Corey is just a heavy wrestler. And when it comes to the hands, I do think that Corey's got to be cautious in this fight. Don't allow yourself to get caught with anything clean. Jan does only have 6 knockouts out of 33 fights, so I do think it's a low percentage outcome. And also, the chin on Corey Anderson, I do think it's a little bit of a myth, because Manoa spent a career of knocking dudes out, and OSP hit him with a thunderous head kick, which I think knocks 9 out of 10 light heavyweights out who have that head kick smashed against the side of the head. So I do think that this whole chin thing with Corey Anderson, I do think it's a little exaggerated. Maybe it's not a myth, you know, he was knocked out by Jean Vellante. But again, Vellante, he's got 10 knockouts from like 16, 17 fights in his career. So again, he was a knockout specialist. Jan isn't that knockout specialist. So although obviously the light heavyweights, 205 pound, 4-ounce gloves, of course it can happen. I just think that Corey's a little bit better on the feet than some people give him credit for. I think his chin's a little bit better than people give him credit for as well. And talking about that striking as well, this is a really fun fact that I found out the other day. Corey Anderson, in his 14-fight UFC career dating back to 2015 with the tough finale fight, has never been outstruck in volume statistically. Never. The closest was Manoa at six strikes apiece. Obviously he was then knocked out. So that's a crazy start. I feel that Corey Anderson is underrated in his boxing. I think his wrestling's really good. I think his cardio's good. I think he's going to be heavy on top. I do think he's going to score takedowns, and unless Jan Blachowicz knocks him out or really damages that leg kick, because this is another quick thing just to quickly mention, Corey Anderson doesn't always react well to the low kicks, so I do think that there's an opportunity for Jan Blachowicz to really get off on these calf kicks early on. If he doesn't do that though, or if he doesn't knock him out, I just don't see Corey Anderson losing this fight. I think the takedowns are going to be there. I think if he's really relentless and heavy on top, I think that going into the 3rd round of this fight, I do think that Jan's going to be really tired. He's going to be worn down from the wrestling, and I think that even if Corey Anderson has lost those first 2 rounds, I think he takes 3, 4 and 5. I think he wins a decision. So I'm going to take Corey Anderson to win this fight. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And that's it, guys. I hope you all enjoyed the quickie today. We'll be back again next week for the fight nights. The Newsome MMA podcast will remain the same for the pay-per-view events. For my bets this week, for the artificial intelligence predictions, for the dog of the week, anything that you need in regards to betting advice, just make sure you visit MMA Play 365. It's a one-stop shop for absolutely any type of gambler, whether you just want to play small, whether you want to play the parlays, or whether you want official bets, or whether you want to get on board with the artificial intelligence. It's all there for you. So go to MMAplay365.com and subscribe to any package. Thanks a lot, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and we'll see you next time.